Detroit Symphony Orchestra. And one of my favorite parts of this job by far is having these talks with all of you. But this is going to be the first time that I'm not doing it all on my own. Halfway through, we're going to have a special guest come out and talk with us about Beethoven 5. So until then, we're going to have a chat about the hall and then the other 3 pieces on the program. Because yes, there are 3 other pieces on the program besides the 5th Symphony. So the audience last night for this pre-concert talk had this answer right away. Mark Twain's actual name was? Bravo. His daughter was named Clara Clemens. And I would like to let you all know that that is her picture right there. That's her cameo on the ceiling, right there. And here in this corner is the cameo of Osip Gabrilowicz, the music director of the Detroit Symphony Orchestra, who was instrumental in having this hall built. They were married. It's not like she's just there because she was Mark Twain's daughter. They were huge patrons of the orchestra. They supported the arts. And Gabrilowicz said he would only become music director here if they built a hall. And so Detroit did such a thing in 1919. It was completed in 1919. And so the very first program that was performed in this hall is the exact program you're going to hear this evening. And it was special because Gabrilowicz didn't only conduct, he also played the piano. As you can see, we have 2 pianos set out already. After intermission, we're going to add a 3rd piano. Yes, the Bach. In 1919, Detroit was an absolutely stunning city. And what I learned recently was that it was the 4th largest city in America. And I learned that in this book. This is an absolutely shameless plug for this book that we're offering in the shop. Amazing information in here about Detroit in 1919, amazing information about the orchestra, what's happened since then, music directors that we've had, information about Naomi Jarvi, Gabrilowicz, Leonard Slatkin, of course, and tons of fantastic information. So we're redoing this program, of course, because it's 100 years since this hall opened. But there are other things that are turning 100 this year that are incredibly important. In 1919, the Treaty of Versailles was signed, essentially ending World War I. The NFL was founded, go Lions. And women got the right to vote with the 19th Amendment. So 1919 was a pretty big time. It was a big time for America, it was a big time for Europe, it was a big time for Detroit. The orchestra wasn't founded in 1919, though. It was in 1887, making it, I think, the 3rd or 4th oldest orchestra in the entire country, your Detroit Symphony Orchestra, which is pretty amazing. The program opens with a piece that really encapsulates what this hall is about. Most overtures from the classical period, things come to mind like Magic Flute or Don Giovanni or Marriage of Figaro. But Oberon, by Carl Maria von Weber, actually starts in a completely different way. So a quick background about what the plot is about. You'll see that it's called Oberon, or Midsummer Night's Dream. It has nothing to do with the Shakespeare plot, I promise you. There are some similar characters, but this story actually is much more relevant to a poem by a German writer. Pretty much the concept is Oberon and Titania, they're fairies, and they get in a quarrel. They're married and they get in a fight. And Oberon decides that he is not going to reconcile their argument until Puck, one of his helpers, finds a human couple that perfectly embody love and all those fairy tale type things, like true love. They don't fight, like everything's gonna be fine, mythical stuff that doesn't exist. And, and they go off, and Puck goes off. And he finds a human that he thinks is going to be one of half of a pair that will be the human couple that Oberon needs to make up with Titania. But what's this human supposed to do if he encounters trouble? Oberon, being magical, gives him a magical horn. And so at the very start of the overture, you're going to hear our amazing horn player, David, play this figure, and I'm going to sing it for you, and I'm sorry. Ba, da, da. Every time you hear that within the overture, that means the human has called on Oberon to help him in a crisis. And so that begins the entire overture, which is a pretty beautiful thought when you think about how it's linked to this hall. What Gabrilowicz decided was he was going to use every amazing aspect of this acoustical space to highlight what was happening on stage. You get pretty much the farthest person from you, except for timpani, sending sound all the way to the back to start the entire history of this hall. As the overture runs forward, you're going to hear very special musical ideas. So what's the point of an overture? Why do we need it? Well, back then it was to let the audience know, hey, the show's about to start. It's not like they flicked the lights back then in the 18th century, early 19th century. And it's also to introduce characters and ideas that would become relevant later on. So I'm gonna give you three things. You're gonna hear the magical horn, you're gonna hear the fairies, and then you're gonna hear a pirate ship and a big brawl, and then you're gonna hear the horn, save them again. So the fairy music, if you had to guess what the fairy music would be, what would you say? Yeah, light, sparkly, someone said flutes, exactly right. You're gonna hear these little da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Yes, perfect. Later on, you're going to hear something that sounds very aggressive, and that's a pirate ship coming to thwart the plans of the humans. But then the horn call comes, and of course, he can carry on his journey. You're gonna hear an absolutely stunning melody later on, and guess what? The humans finally meet. Has anyone seen Law and Order? You know how they always give you that little 2-minute thing at the start to like kind of tell you what the whole episode's gonna be about? No? Yeah? Okay. Law and Order didn't do it first. The classical composers did with their operas, okay? After the overture, we go directly to the double concerto, which is a stunning, stunning piece. There are a lot of similarities between the finale of the double concerto and the first movement of Beethoven 5. And I'm just gonna throw a few things to you for you to kind of orally hold on to so that when you hear the first movement of Beethoven 5, you can think, oh, that's what she meant. So I know none of you have ever heard Beethoven 5, but it starts, ba-ba-ba-bum, and it's in a minor key, it's in C minor. So just that idea, I want you to hold on to, ta-ta-ta-tum. The finale of the piano concerto is in E flat major, which for those of you that know is closely related to C minor. It's the same key signature, but it has an overall happier quality to it. But the main theme for that is da-da-da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da-da-da. Not only that, there are these fermatas and these strong harmonic shifts thrown all over the finale of the concerto, very similar to what happens in the first movement of Beethoven 5. You get the idea, da-da-da, and it's suddenly interrupted by a long-held chord. Did Gabrilowicz make that pairing at the time when he programmed this concert? I'm not sure, but it really is stunning when you start to think about how they might be thematically linked. After intermission, we bring one more of these bad boys out. And, and the double concerto, actually, Mozart intended to play it with his sister, Nannerl, which is very convenient for this evening since Christina and Michelle, twin sisters, are your soloists. Yeah, they're stunning. And after intermission, they'll be joined by David Fung, and you'll have 3 concert pianists playing one of only 2 triple concertos that Bach ever wrote. Most likely, he intended to play them with his sons. You know, it could have been even more because Bach did write 1 quadruple concerto, which we are not doing tonight, but who knows, for the 200th anniversary, maybe we'll tack that on. The Bach only runs about 18 minutes or so, but at the time it was written, it would not have been played on this type of keyboard. It would have been played on a completely different instrument. The instruments were smaller. They didn't have pedals like this. The strings were actually plucked instead of hammered, which meant that there wasn't the same idea of sustain that we have now. You're also going to see that our conductor has made the decision to have the entire string orchestra stand and accompany the soloists. This helps, first of all, to deliver a more interactive experience for the audience. It's wonderful to get to see an orchestra standing while they play, but also it helps with balance, because when Bach wrote this, he didn't intend for this size of instrument to be creating these solo lines. And so the string orchestra is going to be able to project and balance out even more, which, thanks to this hall, you'll actually get to hear. So when we say that there are good halls and bad halls, and good orchestras and other orchestras, and it's all about nuance, and it's all about a certain little color, a certain little balance that happens. And so if you have a brilliant orchestra like we do, and you're working on all of these intricate little things like phrasing or attack of notes or balancing of chords, what's the point if you don't have a space that actually lets you hear it? So thanks to Orchestra Hall, you get all of it, which is going to be incredibly important in the Fifth Symphony. Beethoven wrote 9 of these things. They're all absolutely stunning. 1, 2, all of them. There's a very interesting thing about Weber and Beethoven. If you look up information about Weber, people actually consider him a romantic composer, but he was a contemporary of Beethoven. Weber only died 1 year before Beethoven. In 1826, Beethoven passed in 1827. But before we get too far into talking about the piece, please join me in welcoming our conductor for this evening, Michael Francis. One of the wonderful things that happens within my job is meeting the amazing conductors that come through here and getting to hear their relationship to music that we all know. How do you make a piece fresh? There are over 800 recordings of Beethoven 5. So how does a conductor make it individual and unique? How have you approached this piece, and what sources did you pull from to understand this work?
Well, firstly, very good evening. It's lovely to see you all. As you can tell, I'm from Tennessee. Thank you, Chelsea, for the invitation to allow me to infiltrate and momentarily take over the talk to discuss, well, this iconic piece of music, Beethoven 5. And thank you for intimidating me with the whole 800 recordings. I'd forgotten about that. No pressure. So this piece, it is really the sort of the gold standard by which all classical music is judged. And in fact, it's even further than that. When anybody thinks of classical music, they all go, oh, da-da-da-da, da-da-da. It is that. It's beyond music. It is actually just a single symbol of an entire art form, in the same way that the Mona Lisa is. It is Shakespeare. It is to be or not to be. Everyone goes, oh, to be or not to be. Particularly if you go into room 2B, everyone makes the joke. We forget that sentence is about suicide. It's really powerful. We forget what it actually means. So for me, my desire when we come to this piece, it's not to put what I think about it on the piece, it's to search deeper and to find out as much as I can about what Beethoven really meant. Now, if someone's already discovered that, that's fine. You can't then change it. It is just the truth. But interestingly enough, when I spoke to the orchestra about it, there's a very clear revolutionary narrative that runs through this piece with a lot of evidence, which I shall share with you, which I feel is rather compelling. So in this case, I feel that what's interesting is excavating away from the whole, it's fate, it's doom, it's the grim reaper, it's deafness banging on his ears, all the stuff that you hear, to actually what it really means. Now, this is not my own research. This John Eliot Gardner sort of built an entire thing upon this, based upon someone else's, and I forget that chap's name. But it is really interesting. So when we listen to the beginning of this piece of music, this da-da-da-da piece of music, V for victory, Morse code, everything else, what does it mean? Well, Beethoven was 19 when the French Revolution happened in 1789. As you all know, it's his 250th anniversary next year, and every orchestra in the entire world will be dousing their audiences with a plethora of Beethoven pieces for as long as possible, because, of course, he's the greatest composer. If you think about it, not necessarily if he's your favorite composer, but in terms of his impact and reach, he has to be the greatest composer, in my opinion. So this, 1789, he was 19 years old. He was studying in Bonn, And around that time, there was a lot of sort of interest between people who wanted to stay loyal to the regime and people who really appreciated what was going on in France, that they would sweep through, get rid of the political deadwood, the manipulation of the aristocracy, and bring in a whole new sweeping change of equality for all. And Beethoven really admired the ideals of it tremendously. Of course, we know all about them, liberté, égalité, fraternité, but people forget the next bit, ou la mort, or death. This was life and death stuff. So this little piece of music you just heard that grabs you by the scruff of the neck is actually from Cherubini's Hymn du Panthéon, which was in 1794. And the words, when this theme comes, are Nous jurons tous le faire en main. Any French speakers amongst you, I apologize. But what it means is, we all stand with iron in hand. Nous jurons tous le faire en main. It's a revolutionary clarion cry. He's not inciting violence, because the piece was written in 1808. By that point, we'd already seen the degradation of the ideals of the revolution. And in fact, there's an incredible statistic about this. In 1794, in the 13 months preceding that date, 1,220 people were killed. Then when Robespierre came to power and took over and banned all legal counsel, in the 45 days after that moment, 1,376 people were beheaded. So it became an absolute tyrannical regime. You lost one and you took on another one, which was even worse. And Beethoven always quoted what Schiller said, it was a great idea spoilt by little people. But what he loved was the idea of it. So as we listen to this now, we have that opening, and listen to how it's orchestrated. The violins are low, the cellos and basses are a little higher, so it sounds like one voice, the baritone voice shouting out. And immediately afterwards, the idea is so precious and so dangerous and so subversive, it is not given to one instrument. A lesser composer would go da 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 da, maybe on the violins. A Dittersdorf or a Van Hal or Salieri or somebody. But actually, no, he passed it from here to here to here to here. It's like they're whispering in an antechamber somewhere. It's too precious, too dangerous for one person to speak. And if you were setting it as an opera, they'd be running around fast like this. And we forget the danger of this when we understand what the words were and where it came from. Then this becomes exceptionally dangerous. And he starts it with a whisper, all low down. And then it explodes again out of, yes, but then they go, who's watching? And they carry on. And this dynamic of drive, as well as reflection, which we will hear in the second movement, and the second subject. So in any symphony, you have a first subject area, which we've just heard, with an introduction, the shortest introduction you've ever heard, the Beethoven da-da-da-da bit. Then it carries on. Then there's a transition section, which goes to the second subject. The first subject in a minor key would be called the masculine key, or the masculine theme in antiquated parlance. The second subject would be called the feminine, which would often be in the major key. It would be a contrasting, more gentle idea. Beethoven does this. But the transition here is a little short. Have a listen. Try that one again. It's not that short. That's it. It's usually about, 30 seconds. No, that was about 1.5. Then we carry on. As the second subject unfolds, this to me feels like sort of the Friar Lawrence character in Romeo and Juliet, trying to bring reason to this dangerous time. But listen to the double basses underneath. They're not convinced. You can carry on again. And then darkness comes in, and we feel it coming back again. So the second subject evaporates so fast, and straight away we're back in. So between the transition and the second subject area, it's unbelievably short. We're thrust straight back into this danger. There's a moment later on which it feels like we get a sense of or a glimpse of what he's terrified about. And to me, this almost has an idea of like some giant epic leviathan crushing all in its wake. And what he's doing in this passage here now is playing with your sense of time. Because even though it's in one in the bar, 1, 1, taka, 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 dum, he groups it often in phrases of 4. So it'll be like ba 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 bum, Ba 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 bum. Da 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 dum. Da 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 da. But here, as he shows his epic evil force coming down on us, he starts to mess around with the bars. So when it pops back in with a revolutionary cry, you don't know where you are, and it shocks you. The problem is we know it so well, we're not shocked by it anymore, but you would have been shocked on the first performance. But well, where did that come from? Because he's messing around with your sense of metric time, your comfort level. Let's see if you can guess when it changes. It's going to happen, but when? Are you ready? Ooh. That's the point. You can't anticipate it unless you're an exceptionally clever conductor. You don't know when it's going to happen. And it knocks you in the solar plexus out of the shot. And it's shocking. And it's really desperately unnerving if it's played well. And your orchestra is marvelous, and they do play it very well, so you're in for a real treat. There's an incredible moment which is used by many great artists. In fact, if we think of the film Schindler's List, there's the moment which I think all of us remember, perhaps the most poignant moment, except for, of course, the ending, is when we see the girl with the red coat. And he draws us away from the collective agony to the individual pain. And in this piece in which no one instrument is the star, which the melody is passed back and forth between others because it's too dangerous to carry around, there's a moment which he just stops. And he gives a cadenza, or a fantasy, a free form, a free of time to a single instrument, the oboe. And it is the most profound effect, as if the clouds part, or indeed as if we just hear this lone soul voice. Whatever it is for you, it's up to you. But it's the most extraordinary moment. We go off again. And then we've off, and it continues, and it builds up and up and up. And at the very end of this symphony, and why Beethoven is greater than other composers, he's never monodimensional. Mozart is the same. They can show so many aspects of the psychological condition of the human man, or whatever, human woman. And because he's able to show drive, but at the same time vulnerability. And listen, at the very end of the symphony, after the huge, great, powerful climax in the coda, he goes to this very soft bit in pianissimo before the final thrusting comes down as we agree to power forth with the idea of what the revolution should have been as opposed to what it became polluted. So then we come to the second movement, and the second movement is, to me, influenced by a painting, although I don't know it is influenced, but to me it's a painting surmises what I believe the second movement is about. And the painting is by David, and it is called The Oath of the Hierarchy. If anyone's ever seen this painting. And in this painting, you'll see on the right-hand side, as you look at it, 3 or 4 men standing with their swords up in the air, getting ready for fighting. It's extremely powerful. You see their muscles, you see the strength, you see their purpose, their will, their destiny. But on the other side of the painting, you see the women, mothers and wives, shrouded, comforting each other, weeping. And it's that juxtaposition of both, the importance of war when it's fought for the right purpose, but the terrible personal cost in one image which is so extraordinarily powerful. Well, I believe Beethoven is doing the same thing here, because as we listen to the first melody in the violas and cellos, there's a distinctly military theme, bum, ba-bum, 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 but given to this rather solemn, melancholic idea. But listen, when the winds come in, it feels as if they are consoling us, calling us back from the front, hopefully bringing us away from losing their loved one. The violas stop it feeling victorious. It feels darker. But here, listen to this descending line. It's the German word weinend, weeping concept within it. And the strings then continue with it as we go. As if they are, okay, yes, we understand we will lose you. Then it continues. Listen to what the clarinets have here. This is a melody from The Freie Mann, a song by Beethoven, and I found the words for it, which is most people didn't know it, and the words of this are this. Who is a free man? He who according to his own will, against any tyrant's whims, can set the rules. That is a free man. So very gently in the clarinets, he gives again this subversive message of the individual's rights against tyrannical rule coming forth. And what this piece is a set of variations. We hear the beginning, it goes through, then it comes into C major with the trumpets and drums, which, by the way, is very unusual to have in a second movement, to have trumpets and drums. And here they have a narrative purpose, not just backing up everybody else. Great power. And C major will be the end of the key when we go into the true victory, and he brings it here. Immediately after that, listen to how dangerous and how terrified they seem. So when you understand this piece as a psychological reflection of the cost of going to war, revolution, whatever it is, I believe the human drama of this will come forth in the most extraordinary way. There's all sorts of lovely moments as well, but we'll carry on for now into the next movements. So in the third movement, we have to understand what it was like in Vienna around the time that Beethoven was writing this. Of course, we all know that he'd written the Heiligenstadt Testament when he admitted he was losing his hearing, and by this point he was profoundly deaf. But there's still also a huge amount of secret police. The new emperor who came in was a young man, Franz II, and he was it Joseph? I forget the names of them all. It was somebody the second anyway. And he was absolutely terrified of the French ideals coming in and damaging his hierarchical power. And so there was a huge amount of secret police. In fact, one of Beethoven's teachers, Niefer, was accused of being a member of the Illuminati. One of Beethoven's friends, Max Franz, went off and started taking his own personal guillotine in the 1790s to kill people and lost his head. There was so much danger underneath the surfaces. So at the beginning of this movement, it really does feel extremely scary, almost like in the 1980s with the Stasi in East Germany. And even these little pauses, like we're looking around. And the phrase lengths are very irregular. Let it carry on, yeah. Now listen to this rhythm in the horns. You've heard this before. Nous jouons tout l'Oberon Overture. Ba 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 bam. He's bringing back the same theme from the first movement, but now we feel like we march forward despite being watched. And depending on your personality, you'll either feel like you are the secret police watching, or you're being watched by the secret police. No prizes for guessing which one the conductor prefers. But it's that sense of when they come in, it's exceptionally powerful. And it's clearly a revolutionary march in three, powering forward with tremendous verve and vivacity. Then, when we get to the trio section, we go back into C major. And as I mentioned already, in the second movement we heard C major. We'll hear it here. We'll hear it a lot in the last movement as the victory. We started in C minor. We will journey through. But this time it feels like a premonition of what could happen. It's almost a drinking song in a tavern. And there's a hooligan element to the double basses and cellos. By the way, that's John Elliott Gardner's recording. It's so fast. It's amazing. It's very exciting. We will be a little more reasonable in some of those things. So then we come to the fourth movement, and the transition from the third movement to the fourth is amazing because he takes what he gave at the beginning of the third movement we just heard with the horns, but he gives it to spiky strings, and it feels like the skeletons of the past coming forth. It's a rather supernatural and creepy passage, or it feels like people trying to catch up. It's whatever you want it to be, but there's something exceptionally dark. But when we begin the fourth movement, the instrumentation is fascinating. He introduces trombones for the first time in a symphony. He uses trombones here. He also brings in the piccolo and the bassoon. While the trombones represent the church, in all choral music up until that point, the trombones would back up the choir. So there's an ecclesiastical quality to their addition. The piccolo and the contrabassoon extend our range exceptionally high, exceptionally low. They also represent the wind band, the music of the popular. The populace, the proletariat. So here he is deliberately writing music for all, and the effect is quite astonishing, this blaring, blazing, confident, and powerful C major. clue for this revolutionary narrative that goes on here happens very subtly in the cellos. And here he's quoting from a song, the Chanson de Panthéon by Rouget de Lille, who wrote the Marseillaise. And here you can hear it in the cellos, La Liberté, going on. But his instrument's above and it's whispered. Have a listen to the cellos. That was it. Yeah. La Liberté, La Liberté. Very subtle, but it's there. And now listen how excited we get once we've heard it. We off we go. The final thing to bear in mind just before we finish is the very ending of this piece. And the final thing when we go into the presto, when what we had at the beginning was ba-ba-ba-bum coming down, is now when the double basses and contrabassoons, ba-ba-ba-bum, ba-ba-ba-bum, coming up. Was descending and dangerous, is now optimistic and joyous. Ba-ba-ba-beam, ba-ba-ba-beam, ba-ba-ba-beam. And so, therefore, I offer that to you as a way of listening to this piece. I believe the evidence is reasonably compelling, but you can, of course, totally thrust that out of your minds and listen to whatever way you want. And I'm only offering a view. There is no absolute guarantee. After all, he is dead. We can't ask him. But we do hope you enjoyed today's concert. Thank you very much, Kelly, for inviting me. A pleasure.
Thank you.